The example I use in my book is that it's like a finger snap. Like, there's the intention to snap the finger, there's me doing it and you hearing it. But all of those things happen at once. And that's like this. This is the intention to snap the finger. This is the snapping of the finger, and that's you hearing it. That's us hearing it. But it doesn't. For the map, you have to break it down. And ultimately, working with this tree, a lot of it is breaking down time, and using these solid structures down here to align myself to the point where when I move up into this part of the run, I can literally feel myself letting stuff go that I couldn't let go of otherwise, because it's very firmly held here. My justice stuff is like planted there. My mercy, the stuff where I am so, like, I care so much that it would mess you up when you're getting into God space or death space or the bardo or whatever it is, where the distractions of your life distract you from your true nature, which is, well, what, again, leave it to the poets to describe, but Kabbalah would say would be pure light, divine light, as manifest in the flesh. So that's the map of this tree, and using it will, I mean, in my life, has been massive in my life. I think I wrote the book because I think that it's going to be important for other people. I think it's a super useful tool. And I think that by using it, it unearths latent and, frankly, majestic energies inherent in this town and in this place that I feel, well, this brings me to my experience of using the tree, is that in my life, as it has shown up in my life, the experience, everything that brought me to devote myself to this tree, to write this book, to be here talking to you now, has put me in a position to run afoul of organizations in this town, and it's partly my personality. There's all these different pieces, and there's my personality, but even that, no one's personality justifies some of the things that have happened to me. So while I accept partial responsibility, I'm more interested in taking full responsibility inside this magical item and using it to transform whatever into something that I like. Really, honestly, to be an artist with it, to take the base matter of some of the shitty things that have happened to me in this town and use that as a way to address certain issues that are going on, that do go on in this town, not just to me, that go on, ways we treat each other very poorly, and squander that incredible energy that is available here. And for me, in taking on this tree, I've had to take on a role in this magic trick that is painful. And so I'm going to unpack it as simply as possible. In fact, I think I'm just going to read from the beginning of that chapter. The chapter is called, it's the Gevurah chapter. It's called Kike, the capital with an exclamation point, sort of riot girly, because, as I've said on other occasions, I consider myself, not that I would choose to be it, but a male riot girl from Olympia. With all due respect and insult that might be to the people who really are that thing. They're my sisters, and so I love them. So, Kike begins. First of all, is everyone familiar with what Radio 8-Ball is? Okay. If you're watching this on video, you can look online. Radio 8-Ball is a show that I did on Chaos, our local station, for 10 years, where we answer questions by picking songs at random and interpreting those songs as the answers to the questions, like picking musical tarot cards. And it was the beginning of the synchronistic research, which this, like the Lifehouse Matrix, is an example of, it was just great. It was a super fun show, unlike anything else. And I'll probably say some of that in here. So why isn't Radio 8-Ball on Chaos anymore? It was a popular show. Community members of all ages would call in with their questions to the Pop Oracle. Their answers were gleaned from CDs played on shuffle function and from live musical guests like Ricky Lee Jones, Dan Byrne, Veda Hilly, Anya Marina, Casey Neal, Steve Poltz, gonna go on, Scott Taylor, Bart Davenport, Peter David Connolly, Nomi Lamb, and tons more. Mostly indies, lots of locals. Many of our callers were regulars who had been a part of the show's community for years, including several kids who grew up with Radio 8 Ball. There was nothing like it on Chaos. It was positive, interactive, original, independent programming. And I'd still be volunteering my time and talents presenting Radio 8 Ball on Chaos to this day if I could. So, why did Radio 8 Ball go off the air? Chaos is a non-profit, non-commercial community radio station housed at the Evergreen State College. It's an old-school, free-form indie station with limited national programming and no ruling aesthetic other than, well, chaos, a perfect terrarium for a pop oracle. Radio 8 Ball was born there in 1998. By the time I started broadcasting Radio 8 Ball, I'd already spent the majority of my life connected to the Evergreen State College. Some of my earliest memories are of playing outside my father's office while he psych-mapped the creation of Evergreen's alternative curriculum in the early 70s, as documented in his books The Dream Poet and Experiment at Evergreen, possibly available here at Orca Books. Between 1998 and 2008, Radio 8 Ball grew from an obscure late-night time filler into a popular weekly primetime broadcast with loyal listeners and callers from all over the world. That my little dream-inspired divination show was born in the institution my father helped found, within the view of the sapling under which his bones are buried, felt deeply correct to me. This sense of correctness infused the show with a quality that made it feel particularly indigenous to Evergreen, Chaos, and the Olympia airwaves. So, why isn't Radio 8 Ball on Chaos anymore? This is like Passover. I didn't even know I was ripping off Moses. I have tried unsuccessfully to get Evergreen to look into this question. They simply refused to answer my calls, letters, emails. I fared no better with the local press when trying to get them to cover this case. This in spite of considerable evidence proving that neither justice nor the community's good was served by what happened to me at Chaos. Then I go through in this chapter and lay out a lot of the things. And there's a lot of shitty shenanigans and people lying about stuff and abusing their power. And I give some context of my own other experiences in this town that are similar to it and draw the ways that the pattern of behavior that was directed at me is similar to the way that other people who come from the same constituency that I come from have been targeted in other situations. And you should read the whole chapter. But the main piece, and this is the reason that I think it's important, and why what happened to me is egregious, and I just can't, it'd be smarter for me to let it go, and I can let it go when I run up the tree, but ultimately you can't let it go. Like, Olympia cannot let it go. What happened to me can't happen to anyone. It certainly can't happen at Evergreen, the campus my father helped build. And where I grew up, and it's such a waste. What happened to me was that I was harassed. I was stalked and harassed by a woman who was my co-host after I decided that her behavior had gotten to the point where I couldn't handle it anymore, and I asked her to stop being my co-host. I did what I've been told that everyone in the world is allowed to do. Say no. I said no to a toxic relationship, and a campaign of harassment was directed at me, which I'm going to tell you about in a second. I went to the people who run the station, Jerry Drummond, John Ford, Ruth Brownstein. I went to they're not the people who run the station. They administer the station for us because it's a community station. We hear that every fund drive. And rather than taking a very clear claim of harassment seriously, they mocked me for it and then used it as a pretext to get rid of the show for their own reasons, which you'll have to talk to them about. I consider it, just mostly professional jealousy from people who just don't have a lot to offer creatively and are threatened by someone who does. But that's me potentially being a dick, or maybe me being honest. It's certainly nothing I ever felt like I needed to bring into the public domain until I was attacked the way I was. all of this could just be a he said, she said, my point of view, whatever. Except that in 2010, 2 years after Radio 8 Ball had been taken off the air, Tammy, who was the one responsible for this, Tammy Tillinghast, who still has a show on the air and from which she sometimes says shitty things about me on the air, which is, again, something we know at Chaos you're not allowed to do, except that for some reason you are allowed to do it if it's directed at me. She sent me a letter because she had a relapse of her cancer and she wanted to be honest and come clean about what she did. Now I'm going to read this to you, and if you think that this is from her own words, if you think that this is something that should be allowed or that it's okay to do this to anyone, well, then you are a bully. And it's totally okay if you just be honest that you're a bully. But if you aren't, if you don't think this is okay, then I think it deserves some redress. This is from February 15th, 2010, and I'm sorry if this is bumming y'all out, but I've been waiting to have this conversation. That's why I wrote this whole book, so I appreciate your attention. I know this is some toxic shit. It's about to get more toxic. It's funny, too. I'll tell you a quick little story. The first reading I did for this book, I was invited to an open mic for writers, and then it turned out that it was an open mic for women writers, or people reading stuff by women. So I read this letter. Dear Andras, I am writing to apologize for the ways that I behaved inappropriately towards you when we were working together on Chaos and the ways that I harassed you after we stopped working together. I'm not sure, but I think the sneakiness of my actions and lack of disclosure on my part to station officials may have influenced your dismissal from Chaos, and if so, that is something that should be set right. If there's anything that I can do to assist you in being reinstated at the station, I will gladly do so. Here's what I'd like to apologize for. To begin, I recognize that while we were working together on Radio 8 Ball, I had some very strong and conflicting feelings about you, due not so much to actions of your behalf. I'm using her words, so I wouldn't always write it exactly this way. Of your behalf, but rather to my own personal issues and history. I projected a role of therapist on you, which I imagine must have been uncomfortable for you and which led me to send you emails after each show, and sometimes between shows, in which I tended to spill my guts to you as if you were my actual therapist. I'm sure these emails must have been confusing to you and in many ways probably crossed some professional boundaries. On top of this, my behavior around you in person was usually much more superficially passive. This passive in-person, aggressive in email behavior pattern contributed to a very awkward dynamic, which often made the show uncomfortable for both us and possibly for some of the listeners as well. It was also during this period of working together that a then boyfriend, after I privately vented to him after some of these uncomfortable shows, reacted to my venting by posting some malicious things about you online, which you had to ask us to take down. I would like to say that this was the last time you had to deal with me or my friends posting mean-spirited things about you online. Unfortunately, this was not the case. When you finally did what you felt you had to do for the good of the show and asked for a break from working together, I did not react well to the news at all. My confused feelings and other personal ongoing issues which had nothing to do with you led me to lash out in many ways. First, when I saw some posters for Radio 8 Ball at Chaos, I tore them down on more than one occasion, simply because it hurt me to look at them. I was thinking of myself and my own pain and did not take into account that by removing your posters I was cheating others out of the opportunity to take part in your show. Around this time, after an article about your show appeared in a Seattle newspaper, I'm ashamed to say that again, due to my own hurt feelings and conflicted issues, I sent some really scary and threatening emails to you from a dummy account, in which I called you names like fucking asshole, and even worse, took a cheap shot at your girlfriend, who was always nice to me, by referring to her as a whore. Just for the sake of humor, throughout the book I refer to her as a whore as well. It's not an insult. So, exactly. But this was not intended sacredly, and it was very scary because I didn't know where the emails were coming from or who was tearing down the posters. Around me, I'm just going around like, why are people attacking me in Olympia again? Meanwhile,